Welcome to the Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors can talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. You can find us on YouTube. Just look for my picture, Linda Maria Frank. Click on the picture and about 200 interviews with authors will come up. There's some very interesting information about writing and reading and actually local authors. We have a lot of local talent on Long Island. You can also find us on the LTV website. We are on Cablevision. So we also have a Facebook page. Guess what? The Facebook page is The Writer's Dream. So this is the second part of two shows that we're doing. Usually we talk to authors, but we're doing something called From the Reader's Point of View. And the first show really talked about how you pick a book. And my guest is Mary Lambert. Mary Lambert is an educator. She's a teacher of literature and film. And her favorite book, and it is also the favorite book of many people, is To Kill a Mockingbird. So in this show, we're going to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird. So Mary, hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm good.
Good. So explain from your expertise as a teacher of literature and film, what makes, by the way, the winner of the PBS contest, what is America's favorite book? What makes it the winner? Give a brief summary of the story for those who haven't read it.
The story is, I think, probably what makes it the great book that it is. And that is that it is simple in many, many ways. It's told from the point of view of a 6-year-old child, Scout Finch. And it's basically about what she and her brother and her friend do in the summertime. But most people remember it for her father, Atticus Finch, is a lawyer. And most people remember To Kill a Mockingbird much more for the trial of Tom Robinson, who is a Black man who's accused of raping a white woman or molesting a white woman.
Or probably saying hello.
Yeah, well, basically, yeah. Actually, the actuality of it is that he's kind to her, but her father sees that she has invited him into her home to fix something, and he sees, and she, at that point, because she set it up that way, she goes to kiss him, and this is when the father sees it. And because the father is a white man, she's a white girl, and this is a Black man that she's going to kiss. The father makes it out to be that the Black man has attacked her, and Atticus defends. This is in 1935 in Macomb, Alabama. Sorry. So defending a Black man, a white lawyer defending a Black man during that period of time was not only unheard of, but dangerous. And the book that's what people remember most about the book, I think. But the book is really a wonderfully told story, because it's told from the point of view of Scout, who is Atticus Finch's daughter. She's 6. But she has a wisdom and an innocence that most 6-year-olds don't have. It is, to a degree, people have said, and as an English teacher, you do a lot of research based, if you're going to teach a book. And the research that I did always talks about that Scout is actually Harper Lee.
Yes, well,
that it's an autobiographical novel. Dill, for example, is supposedly Truman Capote, who was a very good friend of hers when they were children, and her father indeed was a lawyer. So she sets this in 1935 in this sleepy little town in Alabama, in southern Alabama, where she and her descriptions are just marvelous at times. Like she talks about how the women, on a hot summer day are sort of melting like the tea cakes, and there are times when I'm reading this book where I'm laughing out loud. There are times when I'm crying. There are times when I'm angry, and that's the way a book ought to be.
Yes.
I have to say, just like Casablanca is my favorite movie, and it was my favorite movie before it was everybody else's. Kill a Mockingbird is my favorite book, and it was my favorite book before it was a lot of other people's.
So the general theme of the book is racial injustice.
Yes, to a degree, that's one of the themes, but
because
I would say that the major theme is much more the idea of innocence and how innocence is destroyed. Right,
but there's so many books. Like, for instance, you can take John Grisham, who also writes about A Time to Kill and A Time for Mercy. It's also racial injustice. But the difference, I think, and this is just my unlettered opinion, is that you're seeing it from the 6-year-old child who doesn't have this overlay of, by the time you're 6, I don't think you really have this overlay of prejudice,
right?
Of racial prejudice. So she's seeing this, as you say, from innocence, and she's the point of view character. And for an author, if you make a single person the point of view character, it's very hard not to put yourself into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and so that's a brief summary of the story. What's the significance of the title, To Kill a Mockingbird? What is?
Well, in To Kill a Mockingbird, there is a whole thing that goes on about the use of guns, and it's established at points in the book that Atticus is not particularly interested in the use of guns. He doesn't think that you really need to use them. He doesn't have one. So his son kind of thinks he's not quite the man that he should be because he doesn't want to use a gun. But at one point, there's a mad dog that starts coming down the block. The dog is rabid. And Calpurnia, who is the mother figure, but is actually the black maid who takes care of the children while Atticus is being a lawyer, she calls Atticus and she says, you have to come home right away. Tim Johnson, which is the name of the dog, we're afraid he's going to start to run down the block, and he's rabid. So he and Heck Tate, who is the sheriff, come, terrorize him back to the house. And Atticus says to Heck, who has the gun, he says, well, try to shoot him, to kill him, because if he begins to run, then he could really be a danger to the neighbors. And Heck basically says, I'm not as good a shot as you are, so please take the gun and shoot him. Of course, Atticus, and if in the movie, it's a wonderful scene as well. Atticus takes the gun and shoots the dog. And of course, Jem is like absolutely flabbergasted by this because he doesn't think that Atticus can shoot a gun. But what Atticus talks about is as a result of that, because then, Jem wants a gun and he wants, all of this, well, you know how to shoot a gun. He said, but to kill a mockingbird is the idea of you don't use guns to do things that are not necessary. So killing a mockingbird, you don't kill a mockingbird because all a mockingbird does is sing. All a mockingbird does is bring beautiful and happy things to people. Mm-hmm. And of course, the mockingbird then becomes the symbol of the novel. So Tom Robinson who is the black man who's
the mockingbird.
He's the mockingbird. And you can make the case that several other characters in the story are mockingbirds, but he's the major one.
So tell me about the rest of the characters. You told me about Atticus, and you told me about Scout. Scout has a brother, and the brother figures pretty.
Yes.
I think he and Scout play off one another.
Yeah, he's a foil for Scout, basically.
Yes,
and Jem, his name is Jem, also a very significant. Notice the names.
Jem.
Scout, being curious all the time. This is the English teacher in me. I'm sorry. Scout's very curious and is always looking for something.
She's the observer.
Yes, and she is the observer, but she's also the scout. You know, going and being curious about everything and getting herself into trouble a lot and all that kind of stuff. And Jem is a Jem. He's quiet. He's he kind of just goes about doing his stuff and protecting her, and you know, being the good kid most of the time. And then you have Boo Radley, who is another major character in the story. And Boo lives next door to Scout and Jem, but Boo never comes out. Boo is a recluse, basically, and it's sort of intimated that he may have some mental problems, but you're never really sure of that. He's just a person who is painfully shy, never comes out of the house, never does anything like that, and is basically kind of almost imprisoned in his own home. Mm. But there is a whole thing that goes throughout the book where Scout and Jem and their friend Dill, and notice the name Dill, and Dill is kind of acerbic, like a dill pickle would be. You know, he's kind of salty, he's kind of bitter, you know, like that. And he makes up stories and stuff like that. But they throughout the book, because it goes over a period of 3 summers, throughout the book, Scout and Dill and Jem at various points try to get Boo to come out of the house. And I mean, some of the things are really funny. Some of them are scary, because most of the time the reader doesn't know very much about Boo. We only know that he doesn't come out of the house, and he's kind of a scary figure because remember, he's being told from the point of view of Scout, who is 6. But of course, at the end of the book, he is the one who saves both Scout and Jem from Bob Ewell, who is basically the villain of the book. And he's the one who has accused Tom Robinson of assaulting his daughter. And because Atticus defends Tom Robinson, his children become the focus of Bob Ewell's anger and the fact that he plans on killing the kids, basically, or hurting them very badly to get back at Atticus. And Boo is the one who saves them.
Okay, if Scout was not the point of view character, would it change the book?
Yes.
If Jem was the point of view character.
Yes, if it would change it, because Jem's older. Jem's older by a couple of years, but he's also a very different character from Scout. Scout's curious. Scout adventuresome.
Yeah, and she's also righteous.
Oh, you know, she is.
And I think the name Scout, it's like Girl Scout, Boy Scout, righteous.
Well, that too. Yep, it could be that too.
And I mean righteous in a good way.
Yes. Because if you go Set a Watchman, which is
I read that.
Written, who knows when it was written? I'm not even sure it was written by Harper Lee, but I read it. And one interesting thing about it is all the flashbacks are the best part of the book. And that's the To Kill a Mockingbird, you know, basically To Kill a Mockingbird part. The rest of it isn't that good. But Scout is, yes, definitely righteous. She has her own opinions. She, you know, she'll put up her dukes and fight somebody. In fact, she does several times in the book. She fights schoolmates because they call Atticus a nigger lover. Excuse the words, but those are the words. She fights him over Atticus. She fights him over something that one of the little boys does that that offends her, so she hits him, and she tends to talk with her fists a lot. Jem is a much more placid character.
Yeah.
He's a much, for want of a better word, he's a more mature character at that point, because he's a little bit older, but he's a Jem. He obeys his father. He's a good kid. He takes care of his sister, and he's not as curious as she is.
Right.
She gets herself into trouble because of her curiosity most of the time.
So the book is compelling, I think, from the point of view that it's this little girl observing really history in the making, and it's the trial scene. I think the trial scene is so brilliant. How would you compare the trial scene in To Kill a Mockingbird with Inherit the Wind?
Oh, wow. Oh, that's interesting.
I just came up with that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's really good, though. Well, I think Inherit the Wind is a bit more technical. It focuses more on the competition between the two lawyers.
Right.
And while you do understand that this is the Scopes trial and there is a defendant in this, it's really much more the back and forth between Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan. Those are not the names.
I think the comparison is that the defendant in Inherit the Wind is science.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And the defendant in To Kill a Mockingbird is justice.
Is just and is racial inequality.
I mean, certainly comment and disagree if you will, but that's just my
because it's justice, and it's in this particular instance, it's the lack of justice.
Yeah.
Because
racial
of
injustice,
racial inequality, which is one of the reasons why I think the book continues to be popular to this day, because Harper Lee in 1960 was when she wrote the book. And about 1935, she's exposing inequalities that nobody wants to know about. Not at the time, the setting of the book, but also not at the time it was written. In 1960, nobody wanted to know about racial inequality. It was a bit later than that the Civil Rights Act and things like that came into being. So yeah, I mean, the difference is to go back to Inherit the Wind, while Scopes is on trial and science is on trial, they are not the major aspect of Inherit the Wind. The major aspect of Inherit the Wind is the fight between the two lawyers.
Personalities.
In To Kill a Mockingbird, the major aspect is Tom and Atticus's fight to keep Tom. You really don't get a whole lot about the other lawyer, except when Tom says, well, I felt right sorry for her, speaking about Mayella, and the lawyer says, like, what do you mean? You felt sorry for you, because how could a Black man feel sorry for a white woman?
Yeah.
Yeah. So but that's the only time you really get to see him. You get to see much more about Atticus from the point of view of Scout, who at that moment is in the balcony with all the Black people because she wasn't supposed to be there in the first place, but she wanted to make sure her father was okay, as Jem did. So Jem, Scout, and Dill are up there with the Reverend watching all of this.
So do you think the book is warm? It's compelling. Is it warm?
Is it warm in spots? It is. Yes. It's warm in its descriptions of the characters because it brings out humor. Some of the stuff that they talk about is just, it's funny. You sit and you read it and you're laughing out loud. When they talk about how Aunt Alexandra behaves to the kids, she's one of the mother figures and she's Atticus's sister, but she's like this battle axe, and the kids have trouble with her. They don't like her particularly.
She's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, she's great. She's a great character. And then there's Miss Morty, who's another mother figure, and Calpurnia, and how, Calpurnia will give them a little swat on the behind when they're not behaving. So there's a warmth and an understanding, like, yeah, that's how people are, even though there is no actual mother in the book, because Atticus, the wife, their actual mother, and Atticus's wife has died long before the book takes place.
So this book hits it out of the ballpark on theme, plot, characters, setting, description, warmth,
everything.
Page turning. I read it in one sitting.
Oh, yes.
Now I have to ask you, how many times have you read this book? Because I know you've taught it.
Oh, I would say conservatively 25, maybe 30.
Whoa.
Because I taught 10th grade for, I just have to remember this now, for 30 out of the 33 years that I taught full time. I taught the 10th grade. And I always used it in the 10th grade. In fact, I was one of the people who did the canon for the 10th grade. So I chose all the books I really liked, So To Kill a Mockingbird, I know conservatively 25 times. And when you're an English teacher, you have to read it through every time, because the kids ask questions, when they're reading it, they're finding things that are different or something, kids always see something that you didn't see. So you better have read that book so that you can respond to whatever it is that they have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it changed the minds of some of your kids? Do you think it opened another point of view?
Yes, because a lot of times that I was teaching this, remember, I was teaching in the 60s, in the late 60s, early 70s. And I remember, because there was a point I was teaching in Indiana, very different from teaching here. I taught there for 3 years. And one of those years was 1968. Okay. That was the time of the Watts riots and the riots in Chicago, which wasn't all that far away from South Bend, which is where I lived, and Rolling Prairie, which is where I taught. And so, yes, I think it did change some of the kids, because especially, when we talk about, because a lot of it, I think they identified with, because the sleepy Southern town in a lot of ways was very similar to the sleepy town of Rolling Prairie and New Carlisle, where they grew up. Okay, so they had a lot of things that they could identify with. But then when it came to the trial of Tom Robinson, we talked about Emmett Till, because that's what that trial was based on. When I did my research, that was the first time I ever heard of Emmett Till, was when I did my research to teach To Kill a Mockingbird. And so I think that the kids, it did change. I don't know whether it changed their minds completely, but it certainly made them think.
Made them think about something.
Yeah, about something more than what they had experienced in their lives to that point.
So we have about 4 minutes left. What makes a book make it to the big screen? What about this book made it to the big screen? Because I love the movie.
It's really interesting because that you say that, because I always used to say to my film students, I always used to say to them, they would say, well, the book isn't like the movie, or the movie isn't like the book, or I like the movie better than I like the book, or the other way around. The question to ask is not, is the movie like the book? They are two different mediums completely. So they can't be the same. What the question that I would ask is the movie as good a movie as the book is a book, or the other way around?
That's a very good way of putting it.
But in terms of To Kill a Mockingbird, the answer is a resounding yes. To Kill a Mockingbird is my #1 favorite book of all time. To Kill a Mockingbird, the film, is in my top 3. The only things that surpass it are Casablanca and Gone with the Wind.
I saw the play on Broadway. I don't think you.
No, I didn't, and I purposely didn't.
But it was so hard to watch. I guess it was Jeff Daniels who I saw as Atticus, because Gregory Peck was so perfect in that role. The relationship between him and Scout and him in the courtroom. I think lots of times when you've read the book and you go to see the movie, the thing that makes the movie is the actor that they choose for
I think that's very true. You know, I mean, every time you read, you know, the greatest hero in movies and all of that, it's always Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch is the top one. And I think that was a perfect choice. And when you think about it, the children were perfect choices. Mary Badham, John Menya, and Philip Alford. The interesting thing about that, though, is you hardly ever hear of any of them again. They never became famous movie actors.
Yeah, that's true of a lot of children's.
But Mary Badham was so perfect in that movie. And one of the reasons that I didn't go see the play, well, two reasons. First was my son said to me, he went to see it, and I was thinking about going to see it, and he said, I said, well, what do you think? The first words out of his mouth were, it was like colorizing a black and white movie. And he knew what that meant to me, because to me, a movie is made the way it is made because that's the way the director chose to make it. Yeah. So colorizing a black and white movie is, to me, a sacrilege.
I didn't like the play.
And Anne, my sister,
the first act was good. The last act was, they preached instead of showed, as far as I was concerned.
And my sister said that they took such liberties with the book because they insinuate there was a fight between, I didn't see it, so I do remember my sister saying these. I think there's a fight between Atticus and Bob Ewell.
Yeah, we have to stop.
We do.
Because we're almost out of time. And this was so interesting, and we're going to do this again. So think about your next favorite book. Okay. Thank you,
I know,
Mary. This was really fun and interesting. I hope that the audience enjoyed To Kill a Mockingbird.